Hi,
Hi,
how are you doing, Astrea?
I'm doing wonderful today, Jade.
Well, it's time for a podcast, it would seem.
Ah, a new podcast, perhaps.
Yeah, a new podcast. We're calling this Ink Fox and Paper Tiger. At the moment, we are going to discuss webcomics.
Yes, there's so many of them.
There's so many of them. It's a fascinating topic whose history I think is a kind of under-discussed, honestly, which is strange considering how many of them there are and how prevalent they still are today.
And how influential and important they were to basically everything in modern
Yeah,
media. Yeah.
Yeah, an awful lot of modern media, TV, and web culture comes from the webcomic era of the late aughts, early tens. And I find it kind of strange that we don't talk about it more. So let's talk about it more.
I mean, there is the problem that webcomics have that a lot of it is increasingly lost media, I have noticed,
Yeah.
while poking around at older ones for this cast.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we just can't find anymore, but we're going to preserve what we can find and talk about it as best
Yeah.
we can. So we should probably introduce who we are for the benefit of the listening audience. My name is Jade. I am a former webcomic artist. I have made three comics, two of which I would call finished, and one of which is about to be finished, uh, called Ask the Werewolves, Fox Me Gently, and my unfinished project, El Indon, which people who read webcomics may have heard from years and years ago. So I have some experience directly in the field. I would not call myself successful, but I would say I was a big-ish name for a while, and I'm happily not anymore. But I've never podcasted before, which is where you come in.
Yeah, I'm Astrea. I call myself a failed art student because I wanted to get into comics and specifically web comics. Circumstances conspired to make it so that I have done podcasting for like over 200 hours at this point.
Impressive.
I have primarily podcasted about video games for the bulk of my time, and I've more recently and more proudly done a left-wing war movie podcast called Hinge Problems. That is still ongoing, but updates at kind of an irregular schedule. I have a lot of history.
Much like many of the webcomics we're going to discuss, it's still technically going on, but
Yeah. I think the video game podcast I had a very webcomic-esque ending.
yeah,
Um, we gotta fix the format. That'll fix the problems. No, we just got bored.
right.
Uh,
So,
and
yes, no, I sympathize with you a lot there. As someone who also got tired and gave up in a couple of scenarios. Yeah, no, I completely get it.
yeah, but
But we
yeah.
want to talk about webcomics specifically for a handful of reasons. What are yours, chiefly?
I love comics. Webcomics were very important to me at a time in my life, and I sort of faded in and out of them over the years. I love comics as an overall medium. It's my favorite medium. And I really also like poking at stuff that people haven't poked at before. Like, there is a podcast about Homestuck, which is very in-depth and very cool, but that's just one webcomic. Uh,
Right. And we should also probably point out we are not intending to discuss Homestuck on this
yes,
podcast at
God
all.
no.
No,
God
I'm
no.
sorry. The text is simply too large. We would be here for ages.
Yeah.
And smarter people have done it already.
Yeah. This is about like stuff that probably fell through the cracks a little bit more.
Right. Stuff
The
that
also
it's
rans.
it's not like forgotten, but it's under discussed,
Yeah.
or like under analyzed, I would say. For me, in addition to, just making comics for most of my life and still loving them and learning to read by getting into them.
Same.
It's a large part of my life that I tend to not really talk about that much anymore. Like, it was extremely formative for me when I was a young artist, a little younger artist. Uh, and I don't know, something about this period of my life just feels under discussed, underdeveloped. And also, a couple of things to point out about our podcast. We are both adults. We'll be discussing adult topics, adult words, adult conversations.
Yeah.
So if you are for the G or PG audience, I'm afraid this podcast may not be for you. I would suggest that if you are squicky about things like swearing or adult like adult exposure, like eroticism. There will be some eroticism on
Oh, absolutely.
on this series. Also, because we're going to be talking about things from the 2000s, 2010s, we will be discussing at least one comic, perhaps several, that you would
Yeah.
find sleazy and problematic today. So just be ready for that as well. Also, one thing I should point out, we are not a review podcast. This will not
God,
be a
no.
review podcast. We are not here to judge whether a comic is worth your time/money. If we're talking about it, we presumably have something to say about it. And we are not interested in like being a consumer advice podcast because, well, for one thing, most webcomics are free, and for another, most of these are so old that they are actually impossible to support these days. Like all their Patreon links are broken, all their PayPal stuff has gone down, they haven't sold merchandise in years, etc., etc., etc. So now we will be talking about the webcomics as pieces of art, not products to consume.
Yeah. There's enough fucking product, enough content review
Yeah,
in the
we're
world.
not here for content. Don't know
Yeah.
about you. I would also like to back when these comics were coming out, like I want to say I stopped reading webcomics around like 2013, 14-ish.
Yeah.
Just
Same.
because I got tired. Uh Back then there was a certain attitude of what I would call the bad webcomic wiki age. Well, a
Oh,
website that's still
Christ.
around, by the way. Where like a lot of webcomics were like hate read or like just revenge read, I guess you'd say.
I
I'm not here to do that. I
yeah,
don't know
I
about
think
you.
I think like in a historical context, it is interesting to note like a lot of things about webcomics presage later media, and that predates like shit like CinemaSins by quite a bit.
Yeah,
And
we're not here to point out all the dings.
yeah,
Yeah, I believe there is some good in every piece of art, even if it is hard to find and hard to digest.
I think there's something interesting about the art in everything, certainly. I
Yeah,
think that there is a nugget of something about someone, maybe even not a good thing, but something about the creator, because it's impossible for art to not have some component of that, which is part of my philosophy with anything I look at.
agreed.
Um, it's like you can't know everything about a person from their art, but art
No, but
that
you can get a good grasp of it, I would
yeah,
say.
yeah, I think so too. Everything I've ever seen by anybody reflects something about them, even if it's not like I literally. Which is not to say if somebody murders in a comic, that means the artist wants to murder someone.
Oh, don't go
But
down that rabbit hole.
yeah,
That way lies madness. Let's not
exactly.
get into that.
Yeah, but yes, I think that art is valuable, and I think it's valuable as human expression, and
Right.
I think and that expression is what I care about, and what something is saying, what it wants to say, and what it's saying despite what it wants to say too.
Yeah. And I did have like a sort of pet theory that I suppose I'll bring up here at the beginning before we discuss anything.
Go for
Uh,
it.
so a key point about webcomics is that many of them are unpaid amateur work. And therefore, there's a difference between what you expect to read here and what you would expect of a professional doing the same for money, often for a company, I would specify.
Yeah,
Um, so there was a time between, I want to say, 2008 to 2013, thereabouts, uh, that I call the Great Animation Backlash, when American animation students began to realize en masse that their industry had thinned out so much that there were almost no chances they would ever be employed. 2D feature animation was never coming back in any real way. We can look at The Princess and the Frog as sort of a last gasp of the great Disney 2D art style, but like it was never followed up by anything else. And 3D animation was steadily being outsourced and underpaid so much that there were very few jobs in the US, especially not enough to support large groups of people living in expensive cities like Los Angeles or New York. Would you
yeah.
argue any of that?
No, I would not argue any of that. It was
Yeah.
really
Now,
noticeable.
what would your citation be for this, Jade? I'm a former animation student, and I was there, and this happened to a lot of my friends. We were in a strange moment in artistic history where artistic tools and skill sets had grown tremendously. It was easier than ever to learn animation, to become an animator, to become good at it, to become popular doing it. But to be paid to do it, living to do it, became all but impossible. It was expensive, skilled work, sort of unfit for the 2010s economy, which had still not recovered from the housing crash. And here in the 2020s, when big corps are genuinely pursuing their goals of never paying anybody for anything ever again, it seems that a reversal of this fortune is unlikely.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem for creative types. And barring the entire collapse of the entire entertainment industry complex, unlikely to change.
Yeah.
I'm
I
keeping
want to
my
say
fingers
that
crossed about that one though.
I hope so. But I can sort of point to a specific moment, which again, I cannot prove. This is
Yeah.
uh, unfalsifiable. So take what I'm saying as just anecdotal with salt. There was that moment. I want to say it was in 2014 when YouTube changed its policy to pay out from number of views to minutes watched, which meant that
God. Yeah.
short form sub 60-second animation became unprofitable overnight. And the only way to make money doing animation on the internet was to either already be popular and productive or pivot to something else. If you lived through the Steven Universe or Legend of Korra fandoms in particular, you saw parts of this, I promise you. People who either were not animators or were not good at it and who had no idea of what the industry's expectations for its workers actually were, nevertheless going at the cast and crew on social media with like blind rage about how they were making their shows the wrong way, how stuff had gotten too simplified, how stuff was off model, just total nonsense arguments like that. And this was not just like fandom resentment and not just cultural resentment. There was a real economic angle to this too that I feel is under discussed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because like so many people wanted to go into animation, it just became literally impossible for them. Many people continued to animate. Many went on to be successful. Many more did not. Many went here to
Yeah.
webcomics, which is one reason I find myself here. Hi, that was a little personal, but it's important that you know it's important that you know where I'm coming from when I talk about webcomics. I still love them to death, but wow, they do hurt in some way. That's my spiel done. You want to start talking about Poppy Opossum?
Yes, start talking about Poppy Opossum.
Poppy Opossum from 2013 to 2018.
Wow, that's the exact time frame that would fit your theory.
Right.
Funny.
I have no idea how well that applies to this author. This is I.S. Everett, also called Morby, a Ringling graduate.
But yeah, it's important. It's part of the pipeline.
Theoretically, it's part of the pipeline.
Yeah.
We'll see. To my knowledge, Morby is a freelance artist still today. This was hosted on WordPress for free with donations. As that's also going to be true for an awful lot of webcomics you read. They're either on WordPress or Comic Press, and they're free with a PayPal link or a Patreon link, and that's how they made their money. I don't think this comic ever sold any merchandise or shirts. If it
Yeah.
did, I
I also
could not
this is
find any.
also firmly post the Project Wonderful ad era, which I'm sure we'll get into Project Wonderful someday when we talk about a comic from that's a little older than this.
Yeah. Oh, and one more thing to point out about what you can expect from our podcast. We're both furries. We're going to
Oh
talk about some
God.
furry stuff. This is a furry comic. It's a very furry webcomic.
This is an extremely furry webcomic. This is furry in like 8 different ways, like specifically furry.
So this comic was updated for about 5 years. It's not finished. Get used to that too, by the way. Many webcomics simply do not finish. Many artists either lose interest, or have bitten off more than they can chew and just become unable to finish it. That's not a bad thing. It's fine for artists to lose interest and work on something else.
Turns out doing something the length of One Piece but with full color art is hard.
Right. It's kind of insane to expect that of yourself, but
Yeah.
oh well. Uh,
This comic didn't even get part 1. It didn't finish part 1 of the story.
Wait, it didn't?
No.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I dug up a little of the Twitter. It was pretty. There was I found didn't find a ton, but I found stuff. We'll talk about that later though.
Oh my god. Okay. But I would also firmly call this a fantasy comic.
Yeah.
Furry and fantasy, it's probably the two favorite genres for webcomics. Period.
Yeah,
I would guess.
Yeah,
There's not a lot of historical realism comics out there. There's a lot of furries. There's a lot of fantasy.
One of the first webcomics, the second one the second one ever, THE Fox. That's a furry comic.
Right.
Yeah.
So Morby did this comic for 5 years. Then they continued on to a comic called Shallow Skin, which last updated December of 22. That is adult only. This one is general audiences, though I have a big asterisk toward that one. Uh, and today they have a Patreon for other forms of art, which I believe are adult only. 275 posts. Seem to be doing well. They don't seem to be as involved today. I feel like they may have found contentment doing other things.
Yeah.
They have not made a webcomic in almost a year, so I think we could confidently say that they are out of the business.
Yeah, that seems very plausible to me.
So, Poppy Opossum, what did you think?
I felt myself getting increasingly distressed by reading it because of how much I loved it.
Yeah, this is definitely a comic that I liked more and more as I went on. Here, we're only going to talk about the first half. We're going to talk about chapters 1 to 5. If the listener, would like to pause and read ahead, uh, I really did find myself leaning into a fun thing with like the more troubled I got, the more I reminded myself, look, don't ask questions, don't think too hard. Everett's art is exceptionally good, like
Yeah.
really really good. They're especially good at toony facial expressions,
Yeah.
depth, scale, volume. I feel like we might have had similar skill sets at that point in our careers, but they were definitely above my level, and I think I'd say they still are. This comic stinks of One Piece in the best way.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a feature, I think, of a lot of media from this particular slice of time, both webcomics and the people who did successfully get into animation was, hey, it's this fusion of late 80s, early 90s funny animals and like kids adventure cartoons, but also I read manga in the middle of that and watched a bunch of One Piece and Naruto and Dragon Ball Z. And uh I'm going to combine those two ideas.
You can definitely tell that Everett draws on Oda's style of character design, especially large geometric shapes, characters made of large geometric shapes, vast differences in scale and height between characters who are nominally peers, like.
Yeah.
And that's accentuated here because these are literal animals who would have literal size differences between them.
Yes, it really does have a lot of it does not really care about how well the animal stuff functions, but it definitely cares about the animal physicality is the thing
Yeah.
that jumped out to me. Like how does a snake run a shop? I don't know. But snakes do run shops and pop
Did they
Hippie
do?
opossum. Uh Possums have pouches. That means something. You know, like
Yeah.
that's a thing. And right from the start, it's emphasizing like features of possums and this particular possum.
Yeah. So Poppy Opossum is a story about the titular character, Poppy Odletta Possum. Is it Odletta?
Uh, Odaletta, I think.
Odletta? Yeah. In a fantasy world populated by talking animals. Uh, this is a very common setup for
Yeah,
lots and lots of webcomics. So may as well do a good one to set us out here. In
yeah,
this universe, everything was birthed from magical trees. The intro reminded me a lot of Okami for some reason.
yeah.
Maybe it was the art style, maybe it was the glyphs they use.
There's a lot of stuff that opens this way. I think there's some lingering influence from like the beginning of the Lord of the Rings movies, where it's like we got to get you up to
Yeah,
speed. And so we're gonna have this montage in a style that's very distinct from everything else that subsequently comes after it. To be like, hey, here's this kind of semi-mystical, more abstracted opening, so you know what the deal is, or at least what the characters think the deal is.
and the chief conceit of this story is that everybody has access to the ability to cast magic, to learn magic, and to operate it with their hands and their thoughts, except for possums. Possums have a special divine handicap question mark where magic does not affect them good or bad.
Yeah,
They cannot be healed by it. They cannot be hurt by it. It just can't touch them for reasons unclear.
which is a very manga like constraint, I would say. Like, hey, here's
Yeah.
a rule. Because this thing does like rules. It likes rules for the powers.
Anyway, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we are.
Chapter 1. Poppy and her daughter Lily arrive in a town called Eggton, which is a suburb, I guess I'd say, of a bigger kingdom called Canopy, set in a giant tree. I really love how Everett draws the scale of this world. I want to say it's on it's
Oh
an
yeah.
early page, it's like page 5.
If all the characters always feel small in it.
Yeah.
The backgrounds are always too big for everybody. It sort of feels like the world isn't for them, which turns out is not accidental, but that's getting ahead of myself too.
Also getting ahead of ourselves. Let's skip directly ahead. I can give you a great example of all of these. Chapter 1, page 18, where Valente first appears.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like this. I was like, this is an absolutely killer villain design. It's so cool.
establishing the birds, the feature of the birds is that they all have magic hands.
Magical gloves that appear to be human hands on top of their wings, where they
Yeah.
would have hands normally. It's a fun way. It's a fun way to address that. Like, oh, is this furry comic going to do feather fingers or regular wings? And they do both.
Yeah.
Fuck you. We're doing both.
Yes. Literally the first thing we see about him is flames. Like that is the first thing he does is he sets something on fire with his hand and takes a drag
His
from a
magic hand.
cigar.
It takes an enormous drag from a cigar. Lots of smoking in this comic. Also,
This
Valenti is pure Roy Mustang from
yeah.
Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah, he exudes gangster energy. Like 1930s gangster.
Also, apparently, Vor is a possible like. There's a lot of Vor in this comic, or implied Vor. He immediately threatens to eat Lily as part of the extortion scheme.
Yes.
And we also meet the mayor's daughter, Petunia Quibble, who is an amazing character.
yes.
I love all the fraught and terrified expressions he has this entire comic.
Yes, because Petunia is trying to maintain control of a situation that's always getting out of control, is how Petunia fits into everything. She's just trying to maintain some stable of normality and keep Eggton functioning and not destroyed by birds who can make things explode.
I'm gonna look at issue 1, page 22. Page where Poppy delivers a fist directly to Valente's cheek, cracks his beak, throws him through a wall and into a tree trunk about 100 meters away.
Yeah.
Or more.
The best part is they established earlier that Poppy is very strong because she tries to
carries her own damn house everywhere.
well that, and she also like tries to open the door to Eggton and she's trying to pull it gently and accidentally just throws it across like the fields outside of Eggton. And then when she throws Valente, he slams into the door.
The very same door. Yeah. It was a great callback. You could tell in that first panel that Everett's art style has not quite gotten used to the physicality of a fist crashing into a cheek and then the recoil afterward.
Yeah.
But this is pretty much the only example of weakness in that art style because it'll get way better later on.
Yeah. It picks up steam fast.
Yeah,
I guess not even fast. I guess that's the
this is-
first year.
Yeah, this is one of these webcomics that just starts off great and develops into exceptional. I love it to death. I love to watch an artist develop in real time. So by the end of the first chapter, Poppy Opossum and Lily are living in Eggton as the housekeepers for the mayor's daughter because they have punched out the biggest enforcer of the local crime syndicate.
Yes.
So off to a rousing start there.
Yes. And then moving into chapter 2, it wants to establish the wider setting besides just the situation too.
Yeah, the city of Canopy, which is a beautiful sort of treetop city. Everything exists on the branches and in the foliage of this gigantic tree, like the size of a county. Or maybe everybody's just very small. It's not quite clear. Yeah. Scale is fun in this game. Black game. It's very game. It's kind of game-like, isn't it?
I mean, that's also a feature of a lot of the stuff from 2013 is how big an influence. Like, wow, you definitely grew up with a PlayStation.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's definitely a Beautiful Joe reference in this very chapter. So, and then chapter 2 introduces perhaps the best character in the
Oh
whole
my god,
comics.
she's so great.
Sister Mary Moonshine, who is Miss Misato from Evangelion if Miss Misato were even more of a mess.
She's a cat who pretends to be a nun because she gets money because she's descended from a saint.
She says.
She said. No, she
She's-
says there was a test. They tested the blood and everything.
They tested her blood and something. You have no idea how reliable that shit is.
I do, because I read some notes about where this comic was supposed to go.
On her very second page, she is not only smoking a cigar and talking about blasphemy, but she is also frankly saying that Petunia's dad, who's like pushing 50 or 60, is extremely hot. We stand a chain-smoking alcoholic hoe cat.
Yes, including the constant implications that she is extremely pansexual and
Yeah.
will bang tons of people.
Yeah, which like that's an interesting point to raise. Like the age rating of this comic. Like, I'm not going to be the prude and say, "Oh, this is unfit for children," but like, there's a lot of like violence and gore and sex in this comic, even if it's not specifically on the page all the time. I would not call this a G at any rate.
Oh yeah, well, there's too much gore. There's way too much gore for a G.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I like comics that like play with tone and question what's appropriate for the audience and whatnot. I am a little lost when the creator themselves describes it as something for general audiences and children. I don't think so, but whatever.
This is for increasingly jaded 23-year-old millennials is entirely the audience of this comic.
Well, that's certainly described me when this was coming out. So
God, did it describe me?
I want to point out chapter 2, page 5. It's throughout the whole series, really, but this comic's theming is about race and bigotry. It is an unavoidable thing in this comic, which is actually kind of strange because sexuality and gender in this world are totally fine. Everybody's chill with everything. No one seems to raise any objections about that. But possums are hated and stereotyped in really, really vile ways. Like, surprising to read. On page 5, it's established that at one point they had bounties placed on them and you could just bring them in for execution in some places.
And
they are legally not considered people because they cannot use magic.
Yeah.
And that those changes are recent.
And there's also like the religious implication because the possum god is what cut everybody off from the divine, according to most of the major religions.
According to the local belief system, yes.
Yeah.
And that just continues throughout the whole thing. And I thought for a long time, like being furries, we're going to compare it to Zootopia every now and again, because this allegory of animals as races comes up an awful lot in furry art. Furry comics and storytelling. And I think this is one of the only examples of it being done right, or at least being done well.
Yeah.
Because far too many comics like try to draw the one-to-one comparison. It's like, oh, it's like actually leaning on Mouse. Mouse is not a furry comic by any stretch of the imagination, but using its one-to-one example of like, oh, this nationality is this species. You'll find that a lot of furry comics, not really knowing what else to do with the allegory, will just do that.
Yeah, and it
doesn't really work. It doesn't really hold up to further examination. Whereas here, because like it's part of the fiction, it's not tied to like any real world example.
Yeah, possums are not anything. They are not.
No, they are not anything. They are possums, and yet you can still see like even though they aren't rooted in specific historical examples, all the possums in this story get real violent microaggressions thrown at them pretty much every single story. Micro and macro aggressions thrown at them in every single story. I found it like pretty compelling. Like, it's impossible to ignore. You can't just lean back and avoid the allegory like you can in some other less well-written stories.
Yeah, and also the fact that possums aren't really like a threat helps. Like, possums are not. I mean, there's reasons that Poppy is dangerous, but she's she's not dangerous because she's a possum. She's dangerous because she's a really strong possum.
Yeah, but she is also an exception among possums. Like most of
Yes.
them are not this titanically powerful.
Which just this chapter also gets into why she is titanically powerful.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And then later on in chapter 2, we meet Madame Shiba, who's great. Everybody in her boutique is fucking great, especially page 6, panel 5 is just her squelching expression, like the nerve you have,
Yeah.
showing your face here.
The best
Smash.
the best part of the page is when she throws the wine glass in
And
anger,
there's
and when it
the
first,
assistant is already there.
yeah, is holding the dust pan under the glass and the blanket to catch it, and is immediately cleaning it up, and somebody immediately replaces the wine glass in her
This
other hand.
happens on a regular enough basis that we just do this now. We have a policy for smashing wine glasses, and we have a backup wine glass immediately available, so that the atmosphere is not broken.
I also like too that, like, yeah, this is how competent they are. They establish like this is a well-oiled machine. It has, without explicitly, they've said that they're good, but it completely establishes the factuality of just how elite these people are at what they do.
Yeah, actually, the page right after that is in black and white, which there is something I want to point out here. Doing a whole like 3-page a week structure at this quality and in full color is like, it's really tough for any artist to do this, especially a one-person job. And I'm frankly amazed that Everett got this far, got through a whole year of basically that.
Knowing their age, they just came out of college doing this too. Like,
Right,
went
yeah.
from 0 to this.
Yeah, 0 to, well, I mean, Ringling's a very good school, but also like it's quite amazing to see the quality to start very high and go even higher. I won't say it's a bad thing, but I would say rather than changing the art style, I would suggest just putting out pages less often. This comic is free. Don't do this to yourself.
Or just make it black and white unless it really has to not be an A for a page. Like,
I mean, the color really does shine, but
yeah.
like it's not absolutely necessary. If it's easier on your hand and on your schedule, then black and white works great. There's a black and white chapter later on that we'll see.
Way more people need to know that, like, the only reason manga can come out is because it's a horribly abusive industry where nothing is run by one person and it's all in black and white.
All right, this is the fight chapter, the fighting chapter.
Yeah. Further influence.
The tournament arc, which lasts one chapter.
It reminded me a lot of the Hunter x Hunter tournament arc, just that, like, we don't need to cover all the fights.
Point out that there's a specific panel here that looks, I swear to God, is ripped directly from Heaven's Arena.
Yeah.
That is page 11, panel 7. That lobby looks exactly like the fucking Heaven's Arena lobby.
Yes. It looks exactly like the Heaven's Arena lobby, and then does the same trick that Heaven's Arena pulls, which is just like, here's a whole bunch of highly memorable characters. All of them are going to get smashed.
Absolutely fucked.
Yes, and they're all smashed in, like, they have one fight to establish that, like, no, they're real challengers, and they've gone through a lot of effort and work to be here, and then Poppy creams this dude, and then you only need one panel for every other one after that.
Yeah, also one of them is blatantly a Beautiful Joe reference.
Yes!
And then, what's his name? Boris. Our man Boris.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure is meant to be an XP of Rockhawk from Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. And I only know that because both characters are at their best if you read them in the voice of Macho Man Randy Savage. Oh, yeah. Oh, you see where the Macho Boar is coming from?
Oh, absolutely. The delinquent pompadour too. The manga delinquent pompadour sign.
We got paid at issue 2, page 14, which starts to show you that Everett has gotten really started to lean on blocking their fights amazingly well with the hip drop and the oh god no please not like this. And then this chapter also introduces us to Friedrich.
Yes, Friedrich, who
is also a possum. I completely missed the detail that he was also a possum when he first appeared. He's just that cool looking.
Also, he can use magic.
an apparent exception to the rule, although there are some revelations about why later on in the story. Uh, I love the way Everett illustrates the teleportation effect on page 17.
Yeah.
Space warps and all that shit.
They they do make a distinction between magic and lucky star powers, which I think are worth calling out here.
These are the fruit powers from One Piece.
Yeah, these are devil fruit.
These are the devil fruit powers for
These
on
are
One Piece.
Nen. These are stands. This
Yeah.
is you've got one cool thing you can do because some people are born under a lucky star.
Page issue 2, page 19 has the classic example of seeing somebody's fist or foot on the opposite side of a figure they've just hit, which is that's a DBZ technique, and I know it's like not like there's nothing realistic about it, but wow, it's great at selling hits. It's just kick somebody and see an impression of a foot come out their back. It's like there's not even gore about it. It's just really gross. You just feel it when you see it.
Yeah, it's it's just taking the logic of the highly exaggerated cartoon expressions because like obviously people's eyes don't get bigger, people's faces don't distort like that. But you could also do that with fights. You could you can physically move bodies in ways that bodies can't move to emphasize something.
Yeah. Unfortunately, issue 2, page 20, does raise one thing that I hate in fantasy storytelling, and I'm going to be a bit of a hypocrite here. Um, when Petunia says in the second panel, he must have been born under a lucky star, Mary says, "What now? Mary, don't tell me you don't know what lucky
Oh
stars
my
are." And
god!
Mary says, "I don't know lots of things." It's like I hate when stories do this. I did this like once when I wrote Elendon. I did like the mandatory beat of like, how do you not know what this is? It was like, why does anyone even ask
Don't
this
worry.
fucking question? It's like,
Just
who are we explaining this to? But the audience. It just doesn't make any goddamn sense. Oh, and it comes with like these cute little puppets and these diagrams. It's like this is dumb. This always takes me out every time I see it.
frustrating in this too, because this comic has been fairly comfortable gently breaking the fourth wall up to this point.
Uh-huh.
So it feels like it wouldn't be that bad to just go, "Hey, dear reader, here's what a lucky star is," and it would have been just as arbitrary, but wouldn't have raised questions of like, why doesn't
Issue
Captain
1,
know?
panel 2, true believers,
Yeah,
etc., etc. And that's this sort of illustrates like this is probably just the worst example and the earliest because like it's early in the story. The writing's
yeah,
going to be a little clumsy. I understand that, but I would say that if Everett has any like real flaws in writing, it's that they cannot seem to stop needing to exposit things. Like more and
yeah,
more and more stuff keeps getting added to the lore and the story, and like we stop to explain it, even if it's just for a line or a beat. We stop to explain it every time it happens, and it's can you not just like let me sit and watch and interpret the cool thing while it's going on? It's like apparently no, and like it just kind of like especially with all the fourth wall breaking and stuff, it starts to speak to a slight lack of confidence in one's own writing ability that you have to keep explaining and breaking fourth walls all the
yeah.
time.
Which is frustrating because you have other bits later, like when they're explaining what the princess's deal is, that feel very integrated into the plot, even though it's a lot of exposition. I sort of just rolled with it, because I guess it was just like, it was probably just, hey, this is sort of just what I think this comic is going to do, because everything did this. This is like completely, which is, your criticisms are valid, but it was like, yeah, that's what I expected. That's what I expect. This is going to happen.
And the fight with Boris ends in a really fitting, really funny way. I could see it coming a mile away because his power is that he gets bigger and tougher the more confident he is. So just shatter his confidence and he'll shrink back down in a
Yeah.
fun and cute cartoony way. He becomes absolutely adorable.
Yes.
He's so small.
He's so
Look
cute.
at him.
He's so cute.
He's
He's such
so
a cute
cute.
little pig. Ah.
And then we get into chapter 3, which I thought was fucking incredible.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's gang war. This is the bit where I went from going along with the story to actively having a great ass time
Yeah, no, no.
reading this comic.
The panel compositions get way better kind of out of nowhere. The environments, you feel really placed in the environments with it too.
Like, let's look at chapter 3, page 7. You see the inside of this kitchen at this Dutch angle. Everett did not used to do that earlier in the story. The backgrounds simply weren't developed. But I also want to point out one of the most important things that a comic can do, comic artists can do, that I also really struggle with. I struggle to diversify my shots and diversify my panel layouts a lot. Everett has no problem with that. Everett is really, really good at mixing up shots with like distance, scale, angle, close, far, etc., etc. Very, very good. No real bother in doing any of that. Even when a page is mostly talking heads, like the very next page, chapter 3, page 8, the angles are always different. The expressions are always new. It's just a conversation between two characters, but simply changing the camera angle around even a little bit adds so much energy to it.
There's a cool little flourish to the typography on this page as well. Is that the pies is also like has R and D between some of the letters, making it pride.
You can't spell pride without pie.
Pie.
Also love that the currency in this world is called nibbles.
Nibbles, yes.
Maybe
and it has its own
maybe
symbol.
the most adorable name for a currency I've ever heard. And the page right after that, page 9, issue 3, just explicitly shows Mary sleeping with another man. It's just like they have their clothes on, but like she's smoking, she's drinking, like they're in bed together. Crazy.
I also like that he's a bird, which isn't that weird in context, but is great visually to contrast. Like, oh yeah, the cat's fucking a bird. In which they disapprove of my unique lifestyle.
And then what else happens here? Chapter 3, page 11 and 12, I guess. After that, these other two possums who are smuggling the vials of drug, I guess, in their pouch.
Oh, that comes up later. That comes up.
Yeah,
that is in chapter.
That comes up much
6.
later. Yes, I know.
Yeah.
But like this is just the bit from Cowboy Bebop. This is the first episode of Cowboy Bebop where they're smuggling the red eye. Page 14 here, and my note that I shared with you was just all capitals, big women.
Big women.
Big women. There's so many big women. And then the other possum's like expression immediately after the panel with the big women. It's like, holy shit, this is a good art style. I love this art style so much.
I love like
look at him sweat bullets.
He's sweating bullets and his face looks like it's melting. He seems like he's a candle.
He's so nervous. He's pulling his own cheeks off. And then there's more big women who come show up later. Oh god! Every character who shows up in this sequence is amazing.
Every character in this sequence has better designs than I have seen in some like big comic books. Like everybody has visible, like their own profile, their own posture, their own way of moving, their own way of talking. Just enough information so you can find out the entire deal of what all of these weirdos' gangs are about, including the cult of the shaved life, the hairless dogma, which is a religion about shaving all your fur.
The what are the other ones? The degenerate housewives.
Yeah, degenerate housewives.
What is this? The fucking warriors? No, don't be hasty. Surely there's something we can offer you. Money, status, handsome men, handsome women.
Handsome women.
Yes, you can. Also, Everett is really good at drawing monkeys.
Yeah.
Furry artists never draw good monkeys or apes. It's so rare to see somebody do it well.
Yeah. I mean, I guess part of it is like, well, you know, they're kind of, if you anthropomorphize a monkey, kind of just...
I mean, they are just monkeys. Yes, I know. They're just us, except less so. But like...
Yeah. I mean, like, macaques, I think you can do stuff with.
Yeah.
Like, and then, still have it be very anthro.
Yeah, and then we have, after that we have maybe my favorite character design in this whole series, which is Fozzie the lamb, who can turn things at right angles by touching them. God, she's so gender. Look at her.
Very elegant with her high-tech glasses. But they got this owl guy who, like, hears something, then twists his head around.
Yeah. Also, are you noticing that like all the birds seem to have the same scars? Is that like
Yes.
is it like a routine? Is it like an initiation thing, or is that
Yeah,
just
no,
coincidence?
God, like parts of it's like, oh, that's just good visual design. It's like every single fucking tiny thing in this comic apparently has a reason it exists, as I
Yeah.
found out diving into it later.
Yeah, no, it's really exceptional detail with the character design. Unnecessarily, I might add too, because it actually makes comics way harder to draw. The more details there are in a character, the more there is to forget. I don't think Everett slips up very often, if at all, with like the
No,
details
no.
in the character design.
No, this is a rare thing where, like, a lot of times I've seen a webcomics like, here's this really detailed, here's this really complicated design, and then as it goes on, the characters like get more and more streamlined. Like, we don't need to show this line, we can draw this, we can draw this. Quite the opposite with Everett. Um, Everybody gets more detailed, everybody gets more emphasis. Characters have different outfits. There is a level of work that you didn't need to do for this that is in this comic.
And then we go to chapter 3, page 25, where Fozzie starts to uh, unload, I guess you'd say, turning this cigar at a right angle and snapping it. It's such a cool shot.
Yeah, the and lots of gimmicks because immediately the character design is very straight. Like she's drawn completely upright, completely like cylindrical until she dodges out of the way of Poppy by turning her whole body to a right angle, and Poppy flies right over her.
And then we meet Mr. Ciccadino in person, although we
Yeah,
meet his precocious daughter first. And we also see
yeah.
Valente in traction after what happened to him in chapter 1.
Magical healing doesn't work on him either. It
Doesn't work
turns
on
out.
him. No, he just sets all the bandages on fire, which like the shot of him on page 30 literally smoking mad and just burning his bandages to ash is like, this is so cool. This is such a cool idea. Then we offer a great health plan. He'll have a shiny new skeleton.
I also like how it takes advantage of the fact that you don't know who Chickadino is, and Chickadino being incredibly tiny does feel like the kind of gag this comic would pull.
Right, but they don't do that. He's about Poppy's height, realistically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they also establish that he has a certain level of menace around him. He's smart enough to like put on polite airs, even though both characters in this exchange know that stuff's going on that's above either of their heads and also behind their backs.
He's also the emphasis is like he will threaten people, he will have people, do hits and stuff, but a lot of what gets increasingly scary about him is how much he's like integrated into the system and uses the system.
He immediately implies that Poppy's daughter's been threatened.
Because he notices that that's what Poppy's big fixation, that she'd do
Right.
anything to help her daughter. Anything.
So, here's a question for you. How long did it take you to notice the eye motif?
The oh,
The eye motif in this story? Because it took me until about this page to
I
realize what was
didn't.
going on.
I did not actually notice the
Everyone
motif.
with a lucky star power has a unique
As an
gleam in their eye.
oh,
And in his
okay.
case, it's a star. You see that on his you can see it on page 33 of chapter 3. He has a star gleaming in his eye and a star behind him in panel 3. That's lucky star power at work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the case with everyone. They have a unique shaped gleam in their eyes, which it took me so long to catch on to that.
The details. The
The details,
details.
the details in this comic, they're good. This comic's good. This comic's real fucking good. Ugh. So Poppy storms back home to see Lily. Oh, and our man Boris is there at slightly larger size because he's feeling better.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, he's feeling better about himself.
Yeah, I got a part-time job at the Burger Box because figurines are so expensive. He's clearly like meant to be like a nerd, a real dweeb. Chickadino, like she's not threatened. And then we go to at chapter 3, page 37, panel 3. Uh, did did you see that?
The wait, is that
Did you see that?
Not until you pointed it out, and now I'm
Did you see
noticing it.
that?
The text, yeah. Wait, there's a little text bit there that
It just
almost,
says pop. I
yeah,
was like,
pop.
what?
Also,
What?
there's sort of there's. Is that supposed to just be like a pocket at the bottom, or is it supposed to look like Boris has just popped a
I,
boner?
I, I'm pretty sure that's a boner.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that's pop for boner because he
because
just
he's
got kissed.
blushing.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah,
I'm like, general audience, right?
yeah,
Yeah, whatever. Doesn't really mean anything on the internet anymore.
yeah. Which
Whatever.
censorship panda should this have had?
I know. Oh God, don't bring those up again. Uh, let's get recording and take a quick break, shall we? Okay. Hi,
Yeah,
we're back after
we're
after a quick break. Chapter 4.
chapter 4.
We have switched art. We have switched the art style up a little here for chapter 4, black and white. But I would like to point out, no less detailed, because here on page 1, just look at Poppy is like dusting the mirror, and Everett has just drawn characters in the mirror as well. It was like the detail here. You didn't need to go this hard.
And then, yeah, as seemingly an apology for not having color, now there's a heavy thatching style, which is like, you just made more. This isn't helping yourself.
I know we haven't talked about it much yet, but it breaks my damn heart to see Everett in the author's notes apologizing over and over for how often pages are late. The comic costs no money. Your only schedule is yourself. Be nicer to yourself, please. Oh my god.
Yeah,
And so Friedrich introduces himself to the group properly this time. So he's part of this. He's part of this episode, and explains that he is from a branch of possums who are. What's the word he says? He says, I suppose your mother must have neglected to mention that the traitor goddess, i.e. the Delphi from the
yeah.
intro, missed a few branches when she stole all the magic. Oh, sure, believe their version of the story. So he is a short-tailed possum, I believe. Uh,
Yes,
so
which
he
they
can
call
use he
themselves
can
a
use very
gamba.
small gamba, which he can use very small amounts of magic, which is interesting. It's nice to see that the rules are not universal, not unilateral.
Yeah.
We meet we saw her in the fight chapter, but here we meet Queen Kit Darling, who is so precious.
Oh, she's so cute. This is not her forte.
No,
She has a forte. This is not it.
no, she's actually not very good at queening. Queening, is that a word? Queening? No,
Queening?
no,
Ruling. I think ruling
ruling.
is, yes. She's not very good at
She doesn't
ruling.
seem all that great at that either.
Yeah. There is despite being a queen, there's obviously an enormous, like, bureaucratic functional machine that is operating basically independently of her, too.
Right. And that's explored a little later in chapters we won't cover on this first episode. We will get to
Yeah.
that in chapter 6, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we learn, starting on chapter 4, page 8 and 9, she has a very curious lucky star power. Would you like to explore that one? Because
Yes.
I feel like you might
Yes.
have a lot to say about this one.
Yeah, her power is that she can see everything at a molecular level, but she can't see it at a macro level. So she can approximately see everything around her. She can, identify who a person is. She can identify where she is, but she can't see the forest through the trees. And what's unique and why she needs Poppy and why she's had possums before as it comes out. Well, not have, but she has had possums in her employ before is because that's magical and Poppy is immune to magic,
Yeah.
which means that possums can be perceived by her.
Can be seen. And it's
Yeah.
also why she trusts Friedrich, you can see, is that she can also see his face. And this part of the story absolutely fascinates me because while this is like an extremely useful and extremely devastating power to have at the same time, like it's an amazing skill, it's an amazing handicap. Just being able to see someone's face is not a good judge of character.
Yeah.
I really like that like hole that writes in the character's personality. Like
Yeah.
she'll just trust someone if she can see their face, but that doesn't mean anything.
Yes, she is.
It's weird. She can see more deeply into most people, literally more deeply into most people than anyone else ever could. But she's got that obvious emotional blind spot. I thought that was so clever.
Yeah. Well, she's just trying to find something. It's something
Yeah.
that she wants to find purchase in her situation. Which becomes increasingly clear. Like she isn't even like remotely at the highest level of anything.
No, you learn that later on, and I believe you can intuit that just by reading this. Is that Kit Darling, despite being literally called queen, is like far from the top of the pyramid. She's so dependent on other people.
Which I also think has a parallel with Poppy that is sort of inverse. Like she does have this magic power, but her field is not magic. Like Poppy's thing is she might be very strong because of her lucky star, but it's not really magical. And her power is she can do this magical thing, but it enables her to do stuff physically. But both of them are very limited in the magic that either comes easily or is at least routine to other people around them.
Yeah. Pop quiz. Her Majesty is the majority shareholder of what pharmaceutical corporation? Exultus.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, there is no law preventing the head of state from having controlling interest shares in one of the most important industries in the world. Cool. Problematic.
Yes.
That's trouble.
I mean, I also think the implication here is that she was happier doing that.
I believe
Like,
so, yes.
yeah, she wants to run the company, and which unusually, because this is a fiction comic, a fantasy comic, she actually does things, which is
Yeah,
very
and is
different
good at
from the.
things.
Yes.
Yeah, it's almost like she earned that position, which, as we all know, does not happen in the real world. Oh, these are
Uh,
alchemist rods. They're used to isolate specific elements within larger compounds. And Lily, being a little kid, asks, "What happens if you use one on like a person?" And questions like that are why they're kept in locked cases.
that is, I fucking lost it at that line.
Yeah, like I something I should point out is that this story has like the gory like tone, like the dark and gory tone, just like mixed with the comedy, and also the theme of uh like bigotry and racial identity. And it has not really slipped on either once. And it's not just that it hasn't slipped; it's that they also sing together really, really
Yeah,
well
yeah.
in basically every example.
A lot of a lot of this comic just I think it like there's too many details, but so much of it is building on everything else. Like
Yeah.
it's a machine where you couldn't remove any component of it because it all has to be there to do what the story is doing.
I was really, really surprised, like how well the themes and the tones sang together as the story went on. It was really stunning to me how well that this writer could stick with the like same atmosphere without losing any of the charm.
Yeah.
This introduced at toward the end of this chapter, we get the climax and antagonist that we meet, Poda, the shape-shifting octopus.
Who yeah, very very scary, very dangerous,
Yeah,
very I
very
like the choice
cool.
I
Really
like the
cool villain design.
I like the choice of octopus too, because an octopus is completely different than any other kind of animal we have ever seen. There are no
Yeah,
aquatic animals, anthropomorphic animals up to this point. I mean, not more than a frog or a
yeah.
turtle. Um, there's no talking cephalopods or, anything like that.
I found that quite fascinating.
Yeah.
I especially like the distinctive eyes, the distinctive octopus eyes,
Yeah.
with the three pupils. It's really cool.
Yeah. And
I
she's
also I also thought it was really funny how her bra is just filled with two more tentacles.
Everett is clearly having a lot of fun drawing this character. Like, because she's an octopus, there's a very old style rubber hose animation look to the movements of Poda. Who, besides just being an octopus, she can do everything an octopus can do, but more so because of her magic. She can regenerate limbs quickly. she's flexible enough that minor injuries don't hurt her. I also love that this chapter has been entirely black and white up to this point, but all of a sudden Pota's blood is blue.
That has color. Yeah, I noticed that
Yeah.
too. It was quite effective. I don't think this comic was ever printed. There would be like no worry about that in a printed version. Also, we get to page 23 where Friedrich uses an opposable toe to hold a sword.
Yeah.
It was sick as hell.
Yeah. Possums have that.
Possums have opposable toes. He just wears gloves on his feet.
Friedrich has a lot of. I feel like there's a lot of influence of Zorro from One Piece on Friedrich.
Yaha. And let's see. It's revealed that the conflict with Poda ties into a much, probably I would guess, the larger scale.
That is the arc of the comic.
The larger scale arc of the comic, which is like celestial forces, etc. Because what were they called? The Sisters of Magic or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
One of their ghosts appears and does this really cool space warp effect. Page 25, the spatial bubble forming and disappearing. I was like, "Fuck, that's cool."
Yeah,
It's just that's some amazing shape and line.
Yeah, a lot of black hole-esque effect here. Like lots of like light distortion stuff bending around. Incredibly annoying looking to draw.
Yeah, probably very hard. And then there's a bit of a denouement on page 27, how the friendly lab assistant is dead, but they're going to stitch his soul back into his body and hope he doesn't notice that he died. But page 28 or 27, the tone here really stuck out to me. I like this page quite a lot. Like the idea that the world's state is being ripped and stitched back together all the time, sometimes very clumsily, just to keep normalcy like trundling along a while longer. What an amazing handful of lines and ideas.
Whoever this organization is, they change stuff all the time.
Sometimes sloppily.
Yeah,
like just the best they can.
He'll be fine as long as he doesn't know he's dead.
He appears on the very next page with like a fucking neck brace. He just says, "Yeah, you need to lose some weight."
Yeah, Poppy, she's just having a dream.
And toward the end, we see that somebody has tantalizingly put a bottle of what's called God's blood in front of Kit, and tantalizing her with more if she will sign a deal.
Which is what the possums were smuggling earlier.
Precisely.
Yeah.
From the Spectre of Fate, who I believe is meant to be our universal big bad.
Yeah.
Throughout the rest of the story, and that is 1 year of Poppy Opossum. Like,
Jesus
to give you an
Christ.
idea of how viscerally good this comic's art style got from point A to point Z. Wow, I was impressed at this point. I was so on board. How did you feel here at the end?
Yeah,
of year one?
I had thought, like, I hadn't been checking the dates at the bottom of the page too closely. And I hit 1 year and I was like, you have to be kidding me. You have to be. There is absolutely no way this is the first year. There's no way. There is no way this was the first year of the comic. There's too many pages. There's high of quality. Many pages,
and the quality climbs so fast. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's pulling off the stuff it's trying to do and keeps getting better and better and better.
Really, really well. Yeah. There was one thing. I've been reading through the author's notes at the bottom of each page. At one point in this chapter, Everett says, quote, "You may have noticed that there is no more comments section on the site, and yes, that's meant to be happening. I've been very disappointed in the drama and general inappropriate behavior I've seen in the comments of what is supposed to be a comic for general audiences, including children and young teens. As a result, I've decided that the feedback isn't worth the hassle of having to regularly moderate people's activity, especially since there are a number of off-site message boards where webcomic discussion can be found." End quote. I can't imagine what possible drama may have been stirred up over Poppy Opossum of all things.
Well,
I'm glad we're not reading it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact timeline of peak Tumblr was.
That would have been during this 2013,
yeah,
2014.
Because Tumblr
that was still early Tumblr.
Yes, it was early Tumblr where everybody loved Tumblr and everybody loved loving a thing until they hated a thing.
Yeah, and everybody loved loving a thing so much that it becomes your moral compass, and everybody who doesn't love thing is ontologically evil.
Yes. Or if you do love Thing and Thing had problem, that means you are ontologically evil because you love Thing.
But thankfully, we don't have to worry about that now. On to chapter 0 with you, Lala. So when did the what's this meme start up? Do you remember?
That's old. That's old.
That's really old.
I've tried to dig into it, and I've heard people say, "Oh, it was this for sure." It's like, no, it was. I remember it before that.
If you had any doubts, this was a furry story. The fact that there's a wolf in sheep's clothing and the oh whoa what's this meme appearing directly on the front
Yeah. Oh
page.
whoa.
Yeah, there's no getting around this one.
Yeah. This is like the oldest oh whoa version too.
Yeah.
And I think but it's supposed to be like you, but it's oh whoa, yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I hadn't brought up yet. The alphabet in this world uses just weird substitution glyphs for English words. Like the V has a slash through it. The capital V has a slash through it that you might notice. So, like, I'm pretty sure that the O's here, the theta symbols, are just meant to be the capital E.
That makes sense.
Which is strange because, well, actually, no, it's not strange. I like when fantasy stories do this. I like when fantasy stories have like the weird, like, not quite readable alphabet, or like if you squint, you can kind of tell what the words are supposed to be.
Yeah, that's fun. That's fun.
That's fun. When I wrote Elendon, I used a cipher with just alien glyphs that weren't part of any language, which was my favorite way to do it because it felt a little more alien, a little more fantastical. But here, I like how like it's sort of set the tone with like, yes, it's a modern setting. You're not meant to be that separated from it. If you look carefully, you can tell what things are supposed to be.
It's supposed to it's expressively conveys that we are not on Earth, but
we're not on Earth, but we're not that far afield.
And it's not a mystery.
Yeah.
It's not like, what does this say? That's not supposed to be weird to you.
So the gang in this story are going to a concert, and we meet one of Mary's boyfriends, Marsh. And I fucking love Marsh. I love Marsh.
Oh yeah, this is one of my boyfriends, Marsh. One of?
One of?
Did I say that? I meant my favorite boyfriend.
That's not better. March has some real T-boy energy. I love it.
Oh yeah, Marsh is very, very, very cute, very sweet. I mean, that's not necessarily a T-boy thing, I would say, but like, Marsh is very enthusiastic about this and loves
the celebrity singer Yulala.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of trans undertones in this chapter. For a lot of
I was actually going to point that out. The trans undertones are probably at their strongest in this chapter, but they've been building for a while.
Yeah.
There's been a few hints at it earlier and later.
It's also interesting that in this bit, Poppy gets weird about something. I mean, like, she's like freaking out because the conceit is, oh, they're going to see you, Lala. She is a sheep pop singer. And everybody's like, oh, look at this sheep, and this is magic.
She is literally a wolf in sheep's clothing, although it is the illusion is maintained through a power.
Yeah. And Poppy can see right through it. So initially it seems like, oh, this is going to be a whole thing where like the wolf is trying to do something sinister. Because why is there a secret wolf?
Because it's an illusion. All illusions are sinister, right?
Yeah. God damn, the black sheep persona of Lala though. God,
Black
that panel.
Lala is like
fuck.
Wow.
I'm gay. Oh god.
Yeah, I knew you'd have a bit of a lesbian reaction to that one.
Yeah, I sure fucking did have a bit of a lesbian reaction though.
And you know what? Same.
Yeah, I was like, oh
same.
My god.
I was like, oh. Anyway, so Poppy gets pulled up on stage as part of a stunt that was actually in the show. There was going to be a possum heckler in the show.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit. I'm like, oh, they pulled the racial allegory in really hard on this one, didn't they?
Yeah.
We're actually gonna have we actually designated a possum as like the acceptable target for our heckler character. It's like, ooh, that's thick.
Yeah, that's pretty
thick.
fucked.
That's some like fucking minstrelsy right there. Holy shit. Oh, I did not that was really uncomfortable to read.
And then of course it's supposed to be a mock singing battle. between the
Hmm.
two of them. And Poppy, of course, because Poppy's great, does really well.
Yeah, Poppy's actually pretty good at singing. And the
Yes,
crowd aren't really that scared of it or like thrown out by it. So
because
the whole routine is ruined.
it's also no. Well, first of all, Poppy is trenched.
Right. Oh, right.
Yes,
Trench, which
yes.
trench cuisine, trench language.
And they have it, and to represent the trench language, which pops up a couple times. Sometimes when Poppy is really hurt, she curses in trench, and
Oh,
not the thing. And these do use completely nonsense glyphs you can't read. And also, yes, there is this thing here though that I think it's Mary specifically saying the music is not authentic. She says that there's something about like the syrupy pop stuff that doesn't feel like it's coming from the heart. And Poppy is singing entirely from the heart because Poppy doesn't know anything. Like she doesn't so it's like, oh yeah, because she doesn't know anything but how to be authentic, which is a
yeah.
trait
She
that
has
she
no
has.
sense of performance, which is the problem in this case.
She will piss off people. She will because she just says what she thinks because she holds her heart entirely on her sleeve.
So the whole bit starts to break down, and Lily is actually the one who steps in and really rips the illusion off by calling Eulala a mean old dog, which not only breaks the spell but also breaks Eulala's like confidence and
Yes.
forces her backstage in a fit of crying. Not exactly what you may have expected from like the villainy side
Yeah.
of this.
Because
You the reader, probably expected that this was some kind of evil plan,
yeah,
but it's not.
she is just literally she just wants to live. She wants to be a pop singer.
Yeah, she just wants to be a pop singer. She wants people to see her as a sheep, and like in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of strange. Like I don't know. How did you interpret the gender here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a lot I had a lot of complicated feelings because there's a bunch of stuff that kind of pops up as we go here. Because it explains too that she is birthed from a fruit, because you can be birthed from a fruit in this
Uh-huh.
world. Like your parents can share blood with a tree, and then
Right.
you're born out of this tree's fruit. And it was sheep who put their blood into a wolf tree. So she is a wolf because the wolf is the wolf tree from which wolves were sprung, but she had the sheep blood in her means she is a sheep. So the obvious metaphor is she's really a sheep on the inside, even though she's a wolf on the outside. Which
Uh-huh.
is there's layers here because she's wearing a wig, a very common feature that a lot of trans women wear. Um,
Right.
she also has a lot of like she dresses a lot like a lot of trans women, especially when they're performing, will dress too.
Uh-huh.
The implication of she is feels like she's something inside and different outside is there, which is that is I have complicated feelings about that because
As
that's
as do I. But like
yeah.
the allegory is not perfect because like it's like is one species an allegory for gender? Is it an allegory for race? Because if you take it on the race angle, then it's
It's
like, oh,
bad.
I thought I was another race on the outside, but I'm actually this race on the inside. We can't say that.
Yeah, but also she actually is because
She
like her
actually
essence
is
was
that. It's like,
determined by the blood that was used to create her, which doesn't actually seem to be a thing in any other part of the comic, right?
yeah,
Like we
it's
see
also I'm not sure how intentional the gender bending allegory is either, because it wasn't that weird that Madame Sheba is not
yeah,
actually
no,
like, is,
that's
is not a cis woman.
yes,
And
Madame
like
Sheba.
and like that surprise wasn't a big deal.
Yes, I mean Madame Sheba is like I think the read is supposed to be like a drag queen,
Yeah,
and I like that. I like Sheba. Like
yeah,
I like because her gender is a very like a cool gender.
yeah. She has
She's
cool gender.
yeah, she has a cool gender.
Eulala also pretty cool gender.
Yeah, you love. That's the other thing about it. That's like this is cool.
Yeah,
Is the
Eulala's just
reason?
fucking cool.
Yeah, because like I like the wolf thing because I like she's drawn really well. The visual metaphor works really really well too. Like
Yeah.
how
Also, the fruit thing solves one of the big problems of furry fiction. It's like, how do couples of like literal different biologies reproduce. Well, in this universe, they can because of a magic fruit. Yeah, it's just that the outcome might be a little unpredictable, but they can.
And I also like how it pumps up the weirdness of this world. I like it whenever the actually very strange nature of this world starts leaking through. Because it's not, because it was just like, hey, here's big trees and people do magic and magic is technology, that's whatever. But this world is much weirder than that. So much fucking weirder than that. And this is a big, like, window into how weird and how weird everything is in this place.
And let's see, this chapter wraps up on what I thought was a pretty sweet note.
Yeah.
With the new performance and the news revealing that the this is just a third persona for the singer to have, kind of like how David Bowie had multiple personas,
Yes.
and how I think Eulala, this being from 2014, I want to say 2014. I feel
Yeah.
like she might be a Lady Gaga send up.
God, you're right. You're right. That makes a lot
Probably
of
true because
sense.
they literally use the word Gaga in this story, like going Gaga for someone.
Yes.
Um, but as far as I know, Lady Gaga is a cis woman from like beginning to end. So I don't know how appropriate that
He
is. Question mark.
there was a lot of controversy because there was this weird persistent rumor at the time that she was intersex.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was just super. I have no idea why. It's alluded to in the telephone video
Oh,
when her
okay.
gender is scanned. It's a kind of uncomfortable scene.
Really bizarre.
Yeah,
2014 was a different time. Isn't it great how fast those different times seem to
yeah.
come
It's
and
like,
go?
if you mean 9 years?
I know.
Uh,
I'm old.
uh.
I'm old. Astrea, I'm old. Help.
Jade, I'm a year old.
And then we go on to chapter 5, which is the last one we're discussing today. This is also a third art style for the comic, this watercolor woodcut look. Um, I think this is the prettiest of all of them.
Oh, it's so gorgeous. This chapter is honestly just a great slice of comic.
Uh-huh.
Like,
This is just a good ass comic issue.
also, is it just me or did the bird like everybody's talking to this bird character who has existed before?
Yeah, Halia.
Uh, hell yeah, but kind of seems like she's really good friends with Poppy in a way that like kind of comes out of left field.
I mean, a little bit, yeah. I was actually surprised that she got promoted to be an on-screen talking character more than she was.
Yeah.
Like, she's been around since chapter 1. She's just been on the sidelines.
Further complicating the gender, she's canonically a trans woman. I
Yeah,
don't know if
which
this comes up in the
we
comic
learned that
though.
later, and that's a
Oh, we
fun
do. Yeah.
detail, and it's not really important to the story.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. No. No. She's good. She's
Yeah.
really cute and good. I like her a lot.
In this chapter, Lily is going on a field trip, and Poppy is tagging along with their teacher. What's her name? Miss Short. Who's
Yes.
this is another one of those characters like, oh, Everett is really good at like showing me a woman with a strange quirk and a kind of unbearable attitude in one page who I nevertheless love anyway. That was true with Betty, the bigoted lady who was won over by pie.
Yes.
It's
And
true.
then
It's true of Mary. It's true of Petunia. It's true of Miss Short too.
yes, I love I love the yeah, I love the women. I mean that's Poppy too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in a
We
way.
just spend way more time with Poppy than the others and get like a ton of nuance and history with Poppy, but she is kind of quirky in that she is an well, no, she's not even that optimistic. She projects optimism for her daughter.
For her daughter's sake. And there's a lot of lore in this chapter. Mostly you can tell that Everett is having fun drawing all these monster designs.
Yeah.
These cool alien fauna. These the bear boars, the wobs, the wasp,
The wasp. Oh,
wasp.
I'm just looking at this now. I didn't notice that I just realized though the bear boar cub from the start of the panel comic is the same one that turns up later.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And this is a chapter that introduces dragons, which is it's always odd to me when otherwise unique settings mix dragons in.
Yeah.
because there's so many real world cultural expectations and assumptions that your audience is going to draw on, like worldwide. So it's always going to be a little clumsy, but again, don't worry about it. In this setting, dragon's blood is like petroleum, like high powered petroleum. It's literally
Yeah.
just drained out of the body and used to power the electrical grid.
Yes.
Yeah.
With a dragon that is alive, but its nervous system is completely taken over by fungus.
Yeah. Which is brutal and gory, and also this also like just keeps hammering home the setting's tone. It's like it's fascinating and also disgusting and kind of cynical to do this to a living creature, a still technically living creature.
And also just a lot of stuff about the setting is so much of this world is operating on a hair's breadth of some kind of these horrifying things that people aren't seeing.
And speaking
Like,
of horrifying, here we go to page, I think it's page eight,
oh yeah,
with the Valola chamber. Apparently, the name of the dragon is Valola, and it is they're bio horror monsters in this universe, which is sick as hell.
yeah, oh wow, yeah, look at this fucking Evangelion hangar
Yeah.
ass
It's
room.
it's
Where
so old the tree has grown through it, or has it grown around the tree? It's not clear which.
yeah.
But it's also
Um
sprouting eyes.
and it has a hatch in its head because they carefully manage its like nervous system directly into the brain so it never gets too alive or too dead.
Again, with the great monkey designs, the Master Roland
Yeah.
on this page, amazing monkey design. And I appreciate page 11 in this chapter for having foreshadowing with a literal shadow.
Which is a thing Everett likes to do to the extent that there are bits of that for things that never actually even turn up in the comic.
So the inciting action of this story, this chapter, is that the animals are growing abnormally large at unexpected rates. And I mean, like in a matter of seconds, they like triple in size,
Yeah.
which is quite something.
Including the wasp.
The wasp and the bear boar, which like
Oh,
the note at the bottom of page 14 is just finally I get to draw bear boars, and I was like,
herbivores.
a fucking men, look at this shit, this rules. Again, I say pure One Piece.
Yes. Oh, and also that thing we know about dragon eyes. Well, this isn't a dragon. The bear boar has
But it's
multiple
growing
eyes
more
now.
eyes. Yeah,
Yeah.
didn't used to have that. Uh, So we get to see in this whole sequence, we get to see Poppy and Friedrich just go at it and at full strength. This, especially page 16 and 17, where Poppy grabs the bear boar by both tusks after it charges her, stops it, and then jumps up into the air and like fucking not doesn't pile drive it, like spin drops it back down onto the ground at top volume. And Friedrich just says, "No one likes a show off." It's fucking sick as hell. If you,
Yes.
it's like Everett has gotten so good at blocking by this point. Look at these layouts.
This also very smoothly establishes him doing something we've never seen him do before, which is that he can use his like magic ghost arm to use multiple swords at once.
Which almost makes you wonder, like they'd call him War Hero at one point because implying that he like obviously he got his position in some war in the past, but like you almost wonder, did he cut the arm off on purpose to be able to do
Yeah.
this? Because this is clearly better. I like that. I'm not sure if it implies that he lost it or cut it off for the sake of extra combat and maybe regrets that now. Uh,
Yeah. But he's very duty focused.
yeah. But as he gets stabbed in the something here, the monks mention that they pull out every single sword they have in the armory for him. They even pull the dragon slayer out of storage, the original dragon slayer that killed this dragon out of storage. And I was like, huh,
Yeah.
you pulled the dragon slayer out of the attic. You pulled Chekhov's sword out of the attic. Did you brush all that Chekhov's dust off its Chekhov sheath, huh?
Yeah.
It's like I like Everett's writing chops a lot, especially for tone and atmosphere, but like wow, they're really on the nose sometimes. you know?
Yeah. It is notable how it wants the economy of like dialogue and scale and pace, but also there are times I'm like, We could have had like maybe a scene where they were walking by the ceremonial dragon slaying sword.
Yeah.
Uh, down that
And
Lights
it's
Madness.
yeah, it's like
But
those pages and like these next few pages where Friedrich just starts talking about all the properties of dragon. I was like, there's too much exposition here. This does not feel natural, which
yeah,
is weird for a story that's gotten really good at like natural conversations between people. Has to plop all these factoids into the conversation, or the audience won't know what's going on, and it's really clumsy. And I know that Everett's better at writing than this. It's
and I also
odd.
don't know how much of it you even need
I don't know either.
because it's a dragon. It's a big thing.
It's a
There's
big
like
dragon.
certain rules.
They're unknowable magical monstrosities. We don't need that much
Yes,
detail.
and we don't even know everything about dragons from at the end of this either.
No,
So yeah,
which I like. I like that they're just kind
yeah.
of they're treated with about the same level of threat as natural disasters.
Yeah, there is something called a dragon bell that apparently repels them.
Yeah, we don't see anything about that in this chapter or the next, perhaps later. And then we get to page what pages are it? 22 and 23, where Lily learns what her classmates actually think about possums, and how they've just been like talking around her this whole time, and how their parents have indoctrinated a lot of awful beliefs about them that they just accepted and just repeated without thinking, because they're kids just repeating these hideous things to another child. And I have to admit, it's not the same, but I grew up with a lot of this. uh I grew up with a lot of awful beliefs about like queer people and trans people that
Okay,
I
I
ended
mean,
up
yeah,
that like I got repeated back to me, and that I internalized and had to grow out of. So
and
I
like
felt these 2 pages like a lot.
yeah, like it was like my parents didn't like it was less of like a thing that I like deeply knew, but like in the sauce of the 2000s,
Yeah,
gay was the insult. It was the thing that was mild enough you could say it, but had enough bite. Like it seems weird to say gay as an insult being mild,
yeah.
but it
It
was, and
feels
like
weird
not
now.
even
Yeah,
just and not even like people will be like, oh, like there's all the slur discourse or like what's reclaimed and what's not when it comes to like various terms, but like gay was the one.
hmm,
Gay was like you didn't want to be gay, that was gay. The shitty thing was gay.
uh-huh.
uh and it was nonstop.
For the longest time. It's page 25, where Lily is having these horrible feelings while this crisis is going on, and like both like the actual emergency and the emotional emergency collide at the same point, where Lily asks her mother out of nowhere, "Possums can be doctors, right?" And Poppy just says, "Lily, we're trying to discuss something important right now." And like that moment also
Yeah,
really stung. It's an extremely real moment with all the emotions, despite all the weird shit that's going on. Uh,
yeah,
it's like these are two people with two immediate needs. One is emotional, one is literal, and they're not getting them met, and it sucks. And like the amazing like turn to the red background and the red shading in that second to last panel. I was like, yeah,
yeah.
that's perfect. That's a perfect tonal moment.
Lily is such a well-written child character.
Yeah, it's
Like
she's
she
she's
is
finally having her arc in this chapter 5, when she was really just kind of a comic relief before this.
like this is a chapter where she learns something very big about possums.
Yeah, big and tragic.
And yes, this is also where Lily and Poppy have a rift that develops.
And then we kick off directly into the fight sequence for this chapter, the real fight sequence for this chapter, and I think page 28 might be the sickest might be the sickest sequence in this whole fucking comic, at least so far. Starting there and going basically to the end. Everett mentions in the notes, that's the most complex Poppy page they've ever made, and yeah, time well spent.
It's so gross. It's so visceral. The only warmth we see is like Poppy's face, which is just this little glimmer of light, which is overwhelmed by the gloom. All overwhelmed by all of the darkness that just, and then the last bit where we have the distance and seeing this thing came out of the clouds. There is an impact through the clouds. It went from above the clouds to the ground, and just the scale of the explosion is bigger than the monastery.
Yeah.
Like,
and then the next page where it comes through the sky like doom, like a Final Fantasy summon.
yeah,
Doom. And then the note there is like, oh dear, I might actually be a ghost now. It's a really great dark joke.
yes, yes. But it also says something, because we know you can have a soul be separated from a body at least for a while. We still have not gotten a good look at this thing.
I know, and we
see it in silhouette.
We won't for most of this sequence. Then we go to page 31. And I love this incredibly small detail that I love. The dragon has an eye on its wrist.
Yes.
And it has eyes on the underside of its neck, it would seem. We never get a clear, like, solid shot of this thing, like in a single panel. And
yeah,
I love the idea of a dragon, like, not like knowing that it's got blind spots where small things can get away from it, and intentionally growing eyes in those spots so it can see them. It's like there's just pure predator energy right there.
Did you notice the detail about the dragon's eyes on this page though? They are octopus pupils, and there is blue blood like Poda. Highlighting a detail here is she has been covered with wasp wax, which started liquid and is now, from all the rain, it is now solid.
Yeah,
and it is flaking off.
Incredible.
The detail.
Yeah.
The detail.
I like this thing's face. I like the monster's face. I like it has a ring instead of horns. And on page 36, it's revealed that this thing can talk, although apparently that was unexpected. And like that's meant to tell you that it's not perfectly a dragon, which I was like, but why though? Dragons appear to be able to do any other damn thing, so why not talk?
My impression with that was that dragons might be able to talk, but not in a way that mortals could necessarily understand.
Yeah, fair enough.
And it's weird that the mortal can.
Yeah. Page 37 pretty much cements that this is a Spectre of Fate creature. It's got the glove on the inside and the tentacles on the inside. I like the Spectre of Fate as a monster quite a lot. It's very small. It's very potent. It's almost a nuisance.
It has a full design.
It does. We saw that in the notes, but I don't think we ever get to that in the comic.
Yeah, that we don't. It turns up in a side piece we'll cover next time.
Cool. And then we get to the sequence where Poppy gets the brilliant idea to shut off its magical reserves by, and again, if we remember that dragon's blood is the potent catalyst for magical power in this world. What if a dragon had some possum blood polluting its veins? Here on page 40, she shuts its mouth on its own breath weapon, which causes the back of its head to explode.
Yes.
And then bites her own fingers to create a blood flow, and then sticks her fingers in the injury.
The breath weapon in this case being like some kind of like, it's like napalm. Like it creates goo and flame, and like it sticks to stuff, and it's viscous.
And how did we completely gloss over the heart condition thing throughout?
We did.
Throughout the whole comic. Throughout the whole comic, it's been established that Poppy Opossum has a heart condition that she takes pills for.
She's gonna die.
Yeah, she's gonna die at age 30 because of this thing. Even
because she's a possum.
Well, also because she's a possum. If this doesn't kill her first,
the pills are why she didn't die at 20.
Yeah, this is the first moment that the heart condition becomes a real actionable threat. This whole combination is a brilliant bit of storytelling. She's taken what most people consider to be a racial curse, taken it up pridefully, applied it in a right and effective way. It's on theme because it's continuing with that whole thing of like pride in oneself, ignoring bigotry, and it's also on tone because it's fucking disgusting in the way it's applied.
Yeah.
And here on pages 41 and 42, the heart condition weakness is also on theme and on tone because it's disgusting, and it also shows why simple pride and power are not enough to succeed. Support is also necessary.
No, that is accurate.
And then Valente reappears, which I know I've praised Everett's blocking and style and art design from basically page one, but the bit this page chapter 5, page 45, where Valente lands on the damn thing's face and sets it on fire, saying "Burn, firebrand," gave me some actual chills. These panels, like holy shit, this is good composition and great color work.
Yes. And I did notice one detail about this is that Poppy got covered in a red tinged mud while she's fighting the blue tinged dragon. Also, the face of the Hand of Fate that appears on the dragon is a human face.
Valente believes that Poppy is a monk from her clever disguise in the mud. And then here on page 47, we get we get Hypno and Vor in 2 panels. I was like, yep, I see you, Jake Sully. I see what you're doing there. It's like it really sells like the weird like creepiness and perverseness of the villain, but also the charm in a funny way. It's like, oh,
Yes,
look at it hypnotize you into eating it and then take over your body.
yes.
Uh,
That's also the monk.
That's some Clive Barker shit right there.
That's also the monk who was next to the bear boar when it was small.
Yeah, the squirrel. He's appeared throughout this chapter. And then here on page 48, I like how even when she's trying to eulogize Poppy, Miss Short still has to call her truly, you were one of the finest examples of your kind and of us all. I was like, oh my god.
Yes, but also as she has been, her whole thing is she has little puppets and that seemingly she could just manifest.
She just made a Poppy puppet.
And there's just a Poppy puppet. The Poppy puppet is shedding a single tear and
Lily is still quite upset about everything that's happened. The emotional core has not left the story, even amidst all this fantasy violence and all this weird, perverse, evil magic that's been going on. No, the more pressing thing is still that Lily is shaken in her soul about her future and how people will always treat her.
And because she has lots of dreams that she can't meet, because in order to be a doctor, you need 16 years of training.
Yeah, and she will only live to 30.
Yeah, and she's already like 6.
Yeah, it's dark. There's not really a lot that Poppy can do about that. There's not much to say or do to make this better. I like that. I like the existential conflict here that we can't punch or talk our way out of. I really liked that. I liked the emotional arc that this comic has taken so far. So that's the first, I guess, half.
It's about 2/3, but it gets hard to judge how much there is left because of the change of format.
Right, because you told me that later on the story becomes prose.
They start switching this over to prose at one point, but also interjecting illustrations and comic panels into the prose. And it doesn't work as well as the art, but we'll get into it.
I know, but also the thing of it is prose is just by its nature, prose is denser. So we might just call this the halfway point, as I will see. So that's our structured discussion done with. It's time for our deeper dive. Themes, noticed, subtext, paratext, metatext, things the author may or may not have intended. Do you have a big takeaway from what we've read so far?
Yeah, no, it is. The structure is basically like, hey, here's all these complicated problems. This character who isn't super complicated being thrown at them. It's also like she is very much the sort of cheery or supposedly cheery. She tries to project a cheeriness and optimism, and doesn't. I also some recurring motifs like kept popping up for me too, which is this comic is a lot more interested in family than I've noticed a lot of similar genre stories are. Like, Poppy has a daughter, which is not a thing I usually associate with.
Poppy is a single fantasy. Mom. That's quite unusual in any story.
Yes. She, especially when the single mom is the main character and not just the motivator of like, oh, I'm the son going out and I have a single mom because I don't have a father figure. but no, like it's her family, and it comes up a little later too, that her background, which we saw, she was not raised by possums. It doesn't color that in, but we do have there's some photos
Yeah,
of
she
her
was
with her
adopted, right?
cat family in Trench. Yeah. She was adopted by a cat family. She is, but even our Petunia is like she works with her dad, who her mom is. Like she doesn't like being compared to her mom. Mary Moonstone has an
Has
ancestor.
an allegedly important ancestor that says nothing about her.
Yes. And it's just something that keeps coming up, how how the world is based on generational cycles and generational characters.
Yeah.
Which is very, very, very different from a lot of fantasy, where it's just like, oh, I came from this important person might come up, but not this sort of much more situated thing with a lot more living relatives too. It is a very fantastical world and fantastical story, but it also everything is based on like our protagonist side is based on basic human emotions, which is one of the big conflicts because the bad guys seem to be very cosmic and our good guys are very personal. Like Poppy and even the Queen are all very like focused on these practical things, while all the mechanics of this bigger thing involving the hand of fate are going around them. The thing about the story too, though, is that it doesn't necessarily seem to be super conscientious. Like there's themes, but each of the themes feels very, they're pieces of the puzzle. It is not it is kind of literalistic in a lot of ways too, which very much reminds me of a lot of this sort of, I don't want to use amateur as like an insult here,
You just
but
mean
it's
not
this very,
professional, just not
yeah,
paid.
yeah. It's not like somebody building this sort of, like, it's not like this is all alluding to a theme. This is like structure. This is very much somebody pouring every single idea and heart out and like thought a lot about like, well, I want this theme, so how does this fit mechanically? And it's very well done, but
Yeah.
it's all
And
moving pieces.
yeah, and I want to point out, although it is kind of our goal on this podcast to dive deeper than most and to explore more than most, I would like to point out that it's rare for webcomics to have even what I would call one identifiable theme. So the fact that this comic is pulling out several and doing them all quite well and in synchronicity with each other is quite exceptional.
Yeah,
It's very unusual to see a product of this quality.
it's
Product, sorry,
it's
a piece of this quality.
it's staggering. It's honestly staggering, and it's the kind of thing you don't see because it's really really hard, and it's very easy to destroy yourself trying to do it.
Right, which may have happened, but
Yeah,
certainly exhausted the energy. But that's for
yeah,
later. Um, I've talked plenty about the effectiveness of like the allegorical theme in this story vis-a-vis species. Um, it really does surprise me that like so many furry artists and furry stories just so clumsily fumble that. And I could not tell you specifically. It's almost like by treating it more irreverently, Everett has done it way better.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, think a lot of it is because Everett has a lot more material stuff. It's not just like a Saturday after school, I don't like you arbitrarily, because it is arbitrary, but it also is like there's a history to it. There's a
Yeah.
lot of thought to the history of the bigotry against
Right.
possums.
And it is
And
ruthless and relentless and it never ever stops being an issue. And it never ties the story down in too much gloom. Like we've gotten to the end of this chapter, which is maybe the gloomiest the story gets yet. But like Poppy being able to shrug it off because it's 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 a two-edged sword for the character because Poppy's able to shrug it off, yes, because she's had so much worse over the course of her life. She's chipper because she's just experienced much worse than this. It's awful in its own way, but
and
it's
she's also living up what she has because she's got 7 years left to live.
Yeah. It's like don't let it slow you down. Can't fuck around. Got to make that shit happen.
I brought this up a couple times. I did keep thinking about how situated in the time. Like, even if I didn't know this was 2013, I could have told you this started in 2013.
Really?
Yes. It has so many little things that I was seeing everything. Like, I think about Steven Universe a lot being one thing where, like, they're just a little older than this. Yeah, but that has a lot of similar stuff that it evokes. Like, family is important, even like stuff like family is an important theme in Steven Universe. There's a lot of complex moving parts with it themes. There's a lot of metaphors for things. Like in Steven Universe, there's a lot of metaphors for queerness flying around.
There's a lot of overt queerness too in Steven Universe.
Yeah. Also in this comic, it's got this sort of there's also just like, this is made up of a lot of things the author loves.
Yeah.
And while that's true of a lot of things, there is this sort of intelligence about it and the specific things. Like, if older web comics, like if they're doing an anime thing, are either doing like, oh, I'm drawing in this anime style, or they're like, I'm doing a parody of, wow, can you believe how dumb anime is? Yeah. But this is like, oh no, this is somebody who read One Piece and was like, okay, or who knows what specific comic, but probably One Piece, and saw the machinery of it, and so like, okay, so you have this core cast of characters, they have their motivations, they have these things they're doing, and they have it for these material reasons, and you also have these bigger gears that they're sort of stuck into, and an understanding of how those stories work, as opposed to just the aesthetics. Because it doesn't copy the aesthetics of manga very much, but the storytelling and structure of it is what it's doing. And it was that understanding of people who didn't just like start encountering like manga in their 20s after their assumption of what a comic was had been established, but people whose comic exposure was probably manga. Like, that was probably the single biggest thing on them. If you're 23, like, and weren't me, you didn't read a lot of superhero comics. And even then, like, the comics I was reading when I was a teenager were, the very age-appropriate stuff like Sandman and Watchmen and, like, that's what I was reading. That's what I loved. And Hellboy. Actually, there's a little Hellboy in this.
There is a little bit of Mignola in this, isn't there?
Yeah,
especially like Valente and some of the darker things.
Yes, and also like the way Poppy's drawn. Now that I think about it, is a lot like how Hellboy fights.
Yeah. No, the fists especially, I noticed.
Yeah.
The fists and the tails. I would say that Everett draws tails in a very Mignola way.
And Hellboy was very in vogue if you were a teenager in the 2000s.
Hey, I
which
was.
Everett was.
How about that?
Yeah, Everett's about the same age as us, I found out. And that's actually part of why I do it, because like, this is exactly what I wanted to do. Like, when I never put it together because ADHD, depression, training, all kinds of reasons. But this was exactly what I dreamed of doing. And then I started seeing everybody else do it.
Oh, babe, don't worry. This is what I dreamed of doing and did, and it burnt me the fuck out.
Yes,
so
exactly. No.
Here I am talking about comics because I don't do them anymore.
Yeah. And yeah, that's exactly it. Like, I've seen, like, I read at Ellen Dunn, and it's like, oh yeah, I see what you're, it's like, I see the gears working there. I see the motivation, and it's that motivation in these kind of works that I feel. And I think it's interesting because we're now getting art that is now a reaction to that era of art in a lot of things.
But we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah.
So, there are a couple of other things I want to mention before we start to wrap. In what chapter is it? Chapter 6, which we haven't gotten to today. In that chapter, Kit and Friedrich's dresses were designed by comic artist Kanesha C. Bryant, who is also called The Very Worst Thing on Tumblr. Kanesha Bryant is appearing in Book of Shadows Paradise Lost with me. I'm in that anthology too. So this would be a good time to plug it if you haven't already read it. Coming out this year from Fortuna Media.
Wow. This is why you want to do Poppy. This is the most roundabout promo I've ever heard.
Right. It's great. What else do we have to discuss before we go? Extrapolation. We can't really extrapolate because we've started to read ahead. But if the comic continues, where do you expect it to go? Where will it go?
Um, yeah, that's difficult because I've literally read where the author wanted it to go.
I know. Perhaps that's not
But yeah,
appropriate in
no,
this episode, but we want to do it for
yeah,
regularly.
yeah. As for extrapolation, yeah, I've read the next chapter, and strangely, it does go exactly where I would have gone if I had. If I had gotten up to this point, getting up to chapter 5, I was just like, okay, well, we've definitely raised the stakes or put in, like, okay, the bad guy can summon, like, disaster scale giant dragon thing. Like, okay, so this is clearly a world destroying thing. Poppy is deeply tied up into it. There's something about Poppy's inherent nature that makes her vitally important to the machinery of everything going around. And Poppy's just gonna keep getting drawn into the machinery despite the fact that she doesn't want to. Uh, and is probably going to have to, like, start stepping up as a character and just keep and confront stuff about herself she doesn't want to confront.
Yeah. I'm essentially in the same place where Poppy's
Yeah.
chipper and practical attitude starts bouncing against problems that her fists and her smile cannot solve. And that there is like her again, I say the point where simple power and pride are not enough to solve problems. Support is also needed. She will probably have to end up leaning on her support network more, maybe even getting important people in her support network killed accidentally or seriously failing them. Like there's yet to have been a point where Poppy Opossum herself critically fails in a big obvious way.
Boy, I definitely don't know anything about that from reading some Twitter notes.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, I'm sure we'll get there. It's kind of
Yeah.
like how if you want to bring back the One Piece thing, I don't how much of One Piece do you know? I should ask.
I know a number of things approximately, mostly just like some broad character or Beats broad character arcs, but nothing too specific.
Okay. So there's the motif of One Piece, which actually, well, not the motif, the formula of One Piece is kind of similar to this story, I'm sure for no small reason, is that the Straw Hat Pirates will show up at a town or an island. There'll be some big crisis there, and they will stomp the villains handily and or violently, and social justice in its own way will be served by the end of the story. Like that's kind of how it goes. There's very little like character struggle. All the Straw Hat Pirates are very flat, very unchanging, very set in their archetypes as they are. And that's sort of how each arc goes. Visit, arrive, conflict, denouement, resolution, move on and repeat at the next island. That's how One Piece goes, especially in the early half. Until a specific arc called Water 7, where there's a town called Water 7. The gang show up and they get crushed. They lose badly. And the villains win. And it's not until the next arc that the team have to they have to get their shit together. They have to focus up and think of what they're doing this time. And there's like lots of infighting in the crew. And Water 7 is one of the most fascinating arcs of One Piece because it's one of the only times that the crew actually have to self-examine and fight each other and disagree extensively. And it's not funny. Like an awful lot of Water 7 is like dark and dramatic and not very giggly. And you the reader have to start thinking about the ramifications of the story. And I'm wondering if Poppy Opossum will have a Water 7-esque arc at some point where things just go to shit and there's not a whole lot anybody can do about it and no one's wrong. The team still have to move on, and maybe that's a struggle. I'm looking forward to that if we ever actually see that in the next what are they? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 chapters. Yeah, 4 more chapters to go. I'm curious. I'm excited. I like Poppy Opossum a lot. Even if it stopped here. Even if it stopped here, I would say Poppy Opossum is a must read.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. Wish there was more.
I wish I'm so sad. I'm so sad that that's gonna be how we end most of these episodes. Is I wish there was more of this. Oh God. Oh. But what can you do? It's webcomics. It's webcomics. That'll be our slogan for this whole podcast. What can you do? It's webcomics.
What can you do? It's webcomics.
Yeah, it's Yeah. Anyway, that's a pretty good episode 1, I would say.
Yeah,
Would you say so? Do you have anything more to touch on?
I would do. Yeah, I was just wondering if I should do like a plug for my. Like, I feel like the plug should be at the end.
Oh, go ahead. I've already done my plug.
Yeah.
By all means.
Yes, I mean, I don't have too terribly much to plug. I'm Astrea. You can find me at Automatic Tiger on a number of social media platforms. I don't, it's changed so fast. Who knows what's even gonna be there by
Yeah,
the time
right?
you hear this? Like, just try Automatic Tiger a couple places. You'll find me.
Yeah.
Also, I do a very irregularly updated, but very good war movie podcast that's from sort of a left-wing bent called Hinge Problems, where we review different war movies, and trust me, it's good. Like, even though it's about war movies, it's interesting.
I
We
listen
pick
to
weird
it.
ones.
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm Jade. You can find me at Cups of Jade most places, or just my link tree. I'm all over the place these days. I'm in many different disparate websites, as I guess we all are now.
I can't wait till we're all back on a PHPB forum, because it's the only way we can talk to each other anymore.
Fucking finally, right?
Uh,
But yeah, I'll call that episode 1, if you will. We'll see you all
I'll
next.
call it episode 1.
Yeah, we'll see you all next time to wrap up Poppy Opossum and talk about what comes next.
Yeah.
All right.
Hell yeah.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you then.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.